Hello and welcome back to Marineford TCG. So after this morning's announcements regarding the bans at the Bandai World Championships over in Japan, there's been a lot of comments, both on X and in my comments as well, around rotation. So I come from a bit of a different place. I'm originally a Pokemon player, as well as a Pokemon judge. So I've been dealing with rotations for years. So I think my perspective could be useful to some of you, to quell, I guess, your fears or concerns around rotations. Because I do think, at least if done right, rotations can be a good thing, actually. So what was announced? So if you look at all of your cards, there are it's a numbering system in the bottom right corner. For example, OPO 1 to 4 have this Gum Fruit with 1, the OPO 5 to 8 and have 2, and 9 to 12 have 3. And this is true for promos, starter deck cards, and everything else too. And from April 2026, so this is a whole year away, there is no panic, no problem at the minute. Only Block 2 and 3 will be valid for playing in championships and official tournaments. And this is going to be extended to also include Block 4, once Block 4 officially starts getting printed in OP13, and whatever starter decks come after that. That is just my assumption, but there is no other logical way for them to do it. So what does this mean? This means in the World Championships most likely, and a good amount of regionals as well as some store tournaments as well, you're not going to be able to use your cards from 1 to 4, starting in April 2026. So what will be rotating? Of course OP 1 to 4, but also the first 9 starter decks, and promos 1 to 39. Later on in this video, I've got slides on each of these sets and products, and we're going to discuss what cards are leaving, and what the impact of those might be. For now, this is a bit more information on an adjacent system they're doing, so I'm not sure exactly what they mean by this. However, they've highlighted these 5 cards here, and said that from April, once we start using this block rotation system, these cards will still be usable, even though they have the number 1. And I have checked this, even the PRB01 reprint of the Manga Shanks has number 1. So I'm not really sure what this means. This either means there's going to be almost like an unban list, where there's going to be a list of these cards that you can use in your tournaments, even though they're from blocks that have rotated. Or it means that these 5 cards in particular are going to be reprinted at some time in the near future with an updated regulation number. And that ties into this. If a card gets reprinted, for example, I think this is probably confirmation that the Nami Searcher is going to get reprinted at some point with an updated block. So it would be that block 3 or 4, we don't know. And this is confirmation that you can use the old version so long as it's functionally the same as the new version. And I've seen some people who are commenting on this saying, only the mangas are going to be legal. You're going to have to spend $300 to play 7-cost Ace. And I'm sorry, if you believe this, or if you've been saying this, you have brain rot. This is not Yu-Gi-Oh! The company is not out to just bankrupt their players. But don't worry, you're not going to have to go and buy your mangas. Please don't believe people who are saying this. Call them out, they are simply incorrect. Bandai have confirmed, with reference to at least this Nami Searcher, this is getting a reprint, and you will indeed be allowed to play any version of this card. I think they just highlighted these because obviously these are very expensive cards, and also the mangas are very popular. They're nice to look at, right? I like to use alt arts in my sim. They like to use mangas on their PowerPoints. So they've also committed to running extra regulation tournaments. If you're familiar with Pokemon, this is similar to expanded format, I suppose. And that's going to include, at least for now, all regulation numbers. And that's fine. So if you are a really big fan of something from OPO1, there's still going to be ways for you to play that. And they did confirm they will be doing up to regionals with this. I imagine the finals and the World Championships will be with this new standard regulation that they're pushing. But if you're just a fan of some of the old cards, there will still be tournaments for you. Don't worry. So the impact of rotations. Now let's talk about rotations generally, at least with respect to my prior knowledge from Pokemon. So rotations can give greater design space, because the designers won't have to consider as many potentially degenerate combos. One card that I would like to reference with this is 8-Cost Kid. 8-cost Kid is one of the cards that they have to be very careful with. Because if they make too many ways for you to not be able to interact with it, that card just turns your leader into an 8k leader with a bodyguard. Which it could get out of hand. It hasn't up to this point, but it could. And it's something that they've got to consider forever. And of course, 6-cost Moria that's just been banned is another one. Once that would have rotated, they'd have had more design space without needing a ban. So I think rotations can reduce the need for bans, because of course eventually the card's going to leave. And so long as it's not broken, and if it's just limiting design a little bit, then that will swiftly not become an issue once the card is rotated. It also keeps the game feeling fresher for longer, and metas can change more rapidly. In Pokemon, one thing you find is when rotation hits, some of the most popular strategies lose key pieces and become not viable anymore, or at least weaker. And other decks can rise up to fill those spaces in the meta that have been left by one of the more powerful decks leaving. So it can make the game a little more interesting and less stagnant. It also slows power creep, just because they don't have to deal with some of the older cards. There's always older cards that are very powerful, and you sort of almost think they might regret having printed them, but they're not powerful enough to ban, but it limits design space going forwards, because you can't print a more powerful version, or even another adjacent version of an already more powerful card. Something like Otama could be a reasonably good example of this. 1 Don 2k -2 power is just very, very good. And it sort of limits what they can do with red to an extent, because you don't want your 2k to also be too crazy. Of course, Suru has the same stats, but 2 costs is so much worse than 2k power. And I think you've seen that the one in Caesar Clown, the Mocha 2k, is 3 cost and only reduces by 1. I don't know. You be the judge on that one, but I do think it would slow power creep somewhat at least. There's also more opportunities for theory crafting and deck building. Of course, with sets leaving and decks mixing up the meta more often, there's even more chances for you to come up with something crazy that breaks the meta, which is nice. It also stops the game getting too expensive sometimes, and ties into my next point, less need for reprints. So we've seen with some of these really old cards that the prices get out of hand, and that's necessitated the need for things like PRB01 and PRB02 to reprint some of these cards. Of course, that's not just older cards. Some of the more modern cards, things like EB01 Brook, are just bananas. And 8-cost Katakuri, even at the time, was pretty expensive. But it at least stops you having to buy expensive cards from the early sets that have not had a reprint for years and suddenly become meta because of a new card. Of course, I do think we're still going to keep getting reprints. PRB01 was incredibly popular. I see no reason why they'd stop, and that helps keep the price of the game overall down, but rotations can also have a hand in keeping prices down. Imagine in 5 years' time if OP01 Kiddymon suddenly becomes meta, hasn't had a reprint for 5-6 years because nobody's playing it, and now it's $100 a copy and it's in a tier 0 deck that nobody foresaw coming. It would feel bad. So I think rotating very old products is generally a good thing for the price of the game. However, if you want to be cynical, you can just say, oh, Bandai is getting rid of my old cards, so I have to buy new ones. Oh no, you have to buy new exciting cards. I'm sorry, come on, man. Well, what is this? Bandai is a company, of course they want to sell product, but most of their product is selling extremely well at the minute. I don't think this is just simply a business decision. If they want to make more money, they'll just print more alt-art folders and expensive alt-art boxes like the anniversary boxes. That's where they're making tons and tons of money. Them rotating your OP01 Perona stacker is not increasing their revenue significantly. I can't play my Doflamingo leader forever. I don't want to play any other leaders. I'm quitting the game. The game is dead. If that's genuinely how you feel, I'm really sorry, but I personally cannot understand the mentality of I only want to play one leader forever. I never want to try a new card because I like this card. Do you even enjoy the game at this point? If you don't have any interest in playing things other than this one deck, do you even enjoy the game? There was a video by a Smash YouTuber a while ago who was talking about his favourite games, and he was talking about whether he could consider Melee one of his favourite games. because he enjoys specifically the competitive tournament rule set. And I think it's somewhat relevant here. If you only enjoy one leader and one playstyle, I don't think you enjoy One Piece card game. There's so many other card games. Just don't find one you enjoy more. A more legitimate concern is your cards may lose value once rotations happen. It's true, but it is what it is. It's good for collectors on the other side because they can collect the cards for cheaper. But it is true that your alt arts, at least, your alt arts especially, will lose a good bit of value once a rotation happens. Most likely. Collecting in One Piece is fairly popular, but not as popular as in games like Pokemon. So I do empathise with this a little bit. But at the end of the day, if you buy an alt art when the set comes out, you get to play with it for 3 or 4 years, and then you sell it for half of what you bought it for. You've had like 3-4 years of fun out of a card for $10. Is it the end of the world? Not really. And at the end of the day, they're committed to extended and extra format tournaments too. So if you are the person that only plays Blue Doflamingo or Green Odin and doesn't want to try any new cards because they're stinky, or you just want to play with the Rerolled alt arts and you don't want to sell them to lose money, well, you can go to these extended format tournaments and have fun with them there. And I really do appreciate that Bandai are staying committed to supporting these older sets and cards in the future, at least in some sense of competitive. So, Set 1. Set 1 has a few cards that are very relevant today. And of course, there are other cards that are in Set 1 and good cards, but not necessarily very meta-relevant at the moment. And one thing to note, I've excluded all the Doflamingo cards from these slides. We don't know how good Doflamingo is going to be. I'm pretty convinced he's going to be very bad after these bans. But if you want to look through your Doflamingo deck, honestly, a lot of it is leaving. From Set 1, Sanji no Tama, 2 of the premier red 2Ks. These have seen play in all sorts over the years. Currently, mostly in Shanks, but both very good cards that are leaving. "3-5 Rush Zoro" is a classic banger, currently seeing play in Zoro, and occasionally in Shanks. Rad Beam, really good card, currently in Red Purple Luffy. This does sort of have replacements in Divine Departure, but nothing perfect. 8-Cost Kid is probably the biggest card from Set 1. This is like the green card. Other than Bonnie, pretty much every deck super relies on this, and even Bonnie makes really good use of this. So I do think green will be massively hit by the loss of Kid, far more than red will by the loss of any of these cards. Desert Spada leaves from the Nami deck, but the Nami deck definitely has bigger problems than that, as we'll cover in a minute. And Izzo is a 2K that leaves in green. It was the best green 2K, now that's probably Tashigi from OP10. But still one of the best green 2Ks. No purple cards because they're all a bit mid, honestly. From Set 2, Newgates leaves 9 Newgates. Not seeing a lot of play at the minute. Mostly just in red, purple, and even that's kind of rare at this point. But the card has historically been very good, so it felt like an injustice to not put him here. Makino is great in every aggro deck, mostly Zoro at the minute. Ace is popular in Marco. Marco is not the most top tier deck, but it is notable that he will be losing Ace. This Luffy is here representing all of the O2 green film cards that Uta will be losing. Includes not only Luffy, but also Brook and Nami and the Chopper 2K, among others. This is a massive hit to Green Uta. Unless they reprint these, I don't see how that deck survives at all. Now let's talk about zero costs. Quite a lot of the zero costs were printed right at the start of the game. I really hope they continue to either reprint or print updated versions of these. These are just really healthy to have in the game, I think. It's like an offset for your decks that run a lot of bricks. You get to have counter, but you also have these cards that don't really do anything in your deck. And just shore up for your deck's counterless weakness. I do expect they will reprint these at some point. However, it must be noted that currently, they are rotating. Magellan is not very popular at the minute, but he has been a classic purple card for ages. Purple Luffy loves this. Sometimes other purple decks play this, but mostly Purple Luffy. But the card is pretty good and will be leaving. A lot of black stuff in set 2, a lot of navy. Both Kuzan and Borsalino have been staples forever, and the same for Tsuru. So currently, black navy is looking a bit weak, but we are going to have many more sets before then to get replacements for these. Set 3 has quite a lot, actually. The red Marco is a popular card in Shanks at the minute. Kaya is one of the best blue 2Ks ever printed, if not the best. Pretty much the entire Nami deck rotates. The leader also rotates, which we'll be covering at the end. But you lose both Rubber Band, Gum Gum Gavel, and also Pilaf, which is a more standard blue card, popular sometimes in Buggy, as well as Marco. Shirahoshi, that sees play in Enel, will be leaving, as well as the Nojiko, that sees play in blue-yellow Nami. 2 more zero costs here. We've got the purple one and the black one. Black one doesn't see that much play, but the purple one is fairly popular. Couple cards from the Lucci deck. We don't know how well Lucci's going to survive these bans. However, if he does, once we get to this rotation, he will lose Spandam and Khalifa currently. Khalifa not the most impactful, but losing your Searcher kind of sucks. And speaking of Searchers, we also lose Brand New, which, at least after rotation, will hurt Kobe somewhat. He will be the premier Navy deck post-rotation. Katakuri is a massive hit for Enel. Enel's already had 1 hit today, and here's a second. Losing Katakuri just will give Enel even greater difficulties at dealing with the high-cost characters in decks. And also, not only does Katakuri leader rotate, but we also lose Tenmum, which will impact Purple Yellow Pudding. And Pero's the same leader, but less of an impact, because they don't always play this. Set 4 is a weird one. There's a few incredibly powerful cards in this, but a lot of it was really poor. Red 0 cost, so the only ones in theory that would survive rotation are green and yellow. Man, get rid of yellow. The yellow one's cringe. But either way, yeah, losing the red one will suck. The Chopper that's popular in the animal decks, both in Chopper and Zuro. The green Doflamingo that's very popular in Bonnie, as well as sometimes in Lim and other green decks. This is one of the most impactful top-end green cards, along with Kid. And green losing access to both this and Kid in 1 year would be pretty devastating for the green mains out there, I must say that. Bonnie without Dofi and without Kid, that's going to be tough. It'll be interesting to see what we get printed between now and then to replace these cards. Tenko's Kaido, popular in Boa. Boa losing access to this, they will need to play... There's not a great replacement for this, honestly. You can play like the 9 cost Mihawk, but it is significantly worse than the Tenko's Kaido. 9 cost Yamato is a yet another hit for Enel. Enel's really the only deck that makes use of this, and he will be losing both this and Katakuri and Raigo. Ooh, that's pretty miserable. Missile Sunday, not the most popular card, but always one you can consider. Black Sabo has been one of the best black blockers since it came out. Currently seeing play in Lucci and BY. For how much longer we'll have to see after the ban announcements, but this is always a consideration in your black decks. Half of Usopp is rotating. Usopp will simply not work without Corridor Coliseum. Ideo, Barto, and King Kong Gun are also very important for that deck. Rebecca and Luffy are more like nice things, but I mean, without any of these cards, Usopp is dead. Beyond dead. Unless we get replacements. And of course, Beige, everyone's favourite 2K, will be leaving, which, you know what, I'm not that sad about this one. This guy's kind of lame. He's like Impel Down All-Stars, right? He just sits in the life and ruins your game. So in terms of leaders from the first 4 sets, there's honestly not that many that are that relevant. Red-Green Law is always a bit of a rogue pick. Lots of fans of Red-Green Law out there. And he's a really cool aggro deck. Zoro as well is your classic aggro deck. Losing Zoro, I'll be a bit sad to see him go. I do enjoy a good game of Zoro. Very fun deck. Dofi has just been annihilated by the ban wave hitting Jinbei. But if that wasn't enough in a year, you can't play him anyway. So there you go. Newgates, he's just on here out of respect. This leader is very bad at the minute. However, he's done his time. He was incredible back in the day. It's kind of like his role in the anime, right? He was incredible back when he was relevant, and now nobody cares. Everyone's stronger than him. Smoker out of OPO2 was the second best traditional black deck, at least before the bans. After the bans, I actually think this might be better than Lucci, but he will be leaving indeed in a year or so. And both Katakuri and Nami, neither the most relevant. Nami always pops up, and Katakuri has his fans, but both of these will be indeed leaving in a year. I'm not sad to see Nami go at all. I think this really opens the design space for blue cards, because every blue draw effect has had to be so, like, carefully designed around this uninteractive leader. And I think Nami rotating and leaving the game will be one of the best results out of this rotation, honestly. I don't mind playing against Nami, but it's really bad for the health of the design of the game. Starter decks. There's not that much, honestly, in some of these starter decks that is that relevant. We've got the Luffy, that starter deck one, the unblockable Luffy. He's not that popular at the minute, sometimes in aggro decks. Bonnie loses their Searcher, which is a bit of a bummer. I imagine this one will get a reprint at some point. You also lose the Apu 2k, but this only really sees play because of its type. This card is bad, and Green Supernova just doesn't have any good 2ks, so you play Apu. We lose Love Love Beam out of Nami, but again, Nami has bigger issues. And the purple Kaido deck actually loses quite a lot. Queen, banger. It's been a banger for ages. Kaido is currently seeing play in Purple Black Luffy. Lead Performer Disaster is very popular in Red Purple, and is also becoming a little bit more popular in Blue Purple Luffy. And Onigashima is just a card that is good in Animal Kingdom, so if we get good Animal Kingdom leaders in the future, we will be losing this card sadly, unless it gets a reprint. In terms of the rest of the starter decks, we are losing quite a few more black cards. Hina, Helmeppo, Marineford, and Toshigi. Losing all of these is a massive hit to Black Navy, although after the loss of Smoker, we don't really have a leader to take advantage of them. Oh, you be the judge. Losing Uta is somewhat notable. She was popular in Lucci, may continue to be popular in Lucci, and that remains to be seen. And this Shirahoshi that was popular in BY, rest in peace, and Purple Black Luffy. Seven Mum is a very just classic, good yellow card. At the minute, it's mostly in Katakuri, but you do sometimes see it in blue-yellow Nami, as well as occasionally in Kid, and losing that will be a little bit of a bummer. In terms of leaders, these are the only two that are really relevant. Kaido is, like, okay. He's a decent rogue deck, and Captain Kid is a pre-release bother. So, I don't know what they're doing for pre-releases, but you might not be able to use Kid anymore, I guess, but Red Sanji's probably just better anyway. In terms of promos, the early ones are usually mostly really bad. We're losing Gordon, but we have Raise Max and Building Snake, so literally who cares? And we're also losing the double attack Ace that sometimes sees play in Red Sanji, but again, it's not the craziest deal. So I hope I was able to convince you that this is in fact not the end of the world. The game is not going to die. Your house is not going to explode or anything like that. I genuinely do think this is a good thing long term. It's going to keep the price down. It's going to keep the metas fresh, and it's going to keep the game interesting. What do you think, though? If you still think this is the beginning of the end, please let me know. I'm happy to hear your reasonings in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.